Hello, this is Natalie Zacharias. I'd like to welcome you to episode 2 of Cosmic Earth Conversations. Sitting here with my dear friend, Alexandra Crow. Hey! um, and before we start anything, I would love, Alex, if you could introduce yourself, where you currently residing, the lands, the ancestors of the lands, and a little bit about who you are and um, yeah, whatever is on your heart.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be invited into this conversation with you. I always love connecting with you, Natalie. So it's fun to create some container for us to flow together. My name is Alex Crow. I'm currently residing in northern New Mexico on Pueblo and Apache land. And I'm with all the pinon and juniper, um, lots of pinon and juniper, predominantly juniper, because she kind of took over these lands. um, and I'm sitting next to a sweet housemate. His name is Buddha, and he's a very sweet cat that is a good companion. He's my housemate's kitty. I'm just settling into this new place, in a state of pretty deep transition, moving around quite a lot and feeling like I'm really in the presence of the mystery very palpably. Sometimes there's like some sense of certainty in terms of direction in my life, and right now it's very open, which is actually quite nice, to be honest. I have a shelter to land, so I feel good and safe. Um, yeah, and a little bit about me. I predominantly work in the realms of embodiment. So my practices and my like the tools that I've cultivated and developed, they all are in service to supporting the soul in healing the fragmentation that happens during a lifetime so that it can come into body fully illuminated, radiant, present, as a way to then there's like that's like the step one. It's like gathering all the fragmented aspects of self, moving through the healing process, and all of that's connected with the body. In my experience, that through the body we recollect ourselves. It's like the soul gets fragmented into different areas of the form. It may not feel like physically embodied, but there's like a field through which everything is held. And the reclamation happens, and we start to feel the soul and the body and the mind reunited. And then from that place, we can work with spirit and work to feel the divine channel that the body actually is to be in service to the whole. So the micro gets healed and then the macro can be served, is how I kind of understand and orient my work. My history, I grew up dancing. I've been a dancer most of my life, and so the movement arts has been deeply influential to how I understand my body and my creativity and my communication, actually. Yeah, the body speaks. And I'm able to receive people in that way. I'm really receiving their being through their embodiment and how they express themselves through their body. I receive a lot of direct information that way. And so, of course, like living in a virtual reality now where I don't get to like see and touch and be with people has been kind of a wild shift. I'm having to like perceive much more subtly through the ether, which it definitely has expanded my capacities to sense and feel, but it's definitely easier when you're actually in the presence of someone. Yeah, and my work has evolved. So I practiced and have been teaching yoga, traditional yoga, for some time, and um, then shifted more into the Chinese internal arts. So now I'm my personal training is in Qigong, Kung Fu, and Cha Dao, which is the way of tea. So all of those practices are working together in my personal development, and it's starting to lead into what I offer, but predominantly what I'm working in is in the realms of the what I'm calling the Yin Way, which is a collection of practices from the yoga tradition that really support the medicine that I feel like we need at this time as a species.
Yeah.
Yin yoga and Yodra, just practices that help us into the subtler and sometimes not so subtle aspects of the body.
Yeah, sometimes with the loudest parts of our body.
Truly. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that we were able to make the time to connect and have this conversation. I feel like it's very timely. Um, I was sharing with you before we started recording about the conversation I had yesterday with my friend Claudia, and how we were talking about the nervous system. And actually, something that we ended up talking about is like what's happening on Turtle Island. And um, she was describing like her perspective of what was happening and stuff like that. And it kind of like I realized like what she was explaining basically was the need for the nervous system of this land and the people on the land, because we're not separate from it, like how much that needs to be restored, um, healed, uh, like what is it called, regulated, like all of those things, how that's foundational to what if we want to walk forward in a good way, like that's foundational. And as you were talking about, helping support people and healing, how that in people focusing on their personal healing, how that has that like that effect to like the bigger picture. I feel um, the yin practices that you embody and that you teach and you practice are so helpful for that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways for people to access their personal healing. And I feel, God can speak from personal experiences. I used to always think like the way to heal is like to go strong and hard and like and like and
Let's get it done.
yeah, like let's do it, let's do it. And like I come from like I had like I was an athlete for a long time in my life. And so it was like practice hard, practice hard, practice hard, like run, push your body to the limit, all those things.
Yeah.
And um and would have to stretch my body and my mind and like over the edge, right? 'Cause some of those I remember practices like my body just wanted to give up, but I was like, no, gotta keep going. And it's funny because I think I had this assumption that practices that were slower would be easier. And like I know we've talked about this because I've attended some you see where I'm going with this. I've attended your yin yoga classes that have been online and have been really like resourceful and helpful, especially this year with everything that's going on. And my gosh, those are some of the hardest practices I've experienced. Like I never realized how antsy my body could get in holding a position and like breathing into it. And then I would find myself trying to access those mechanisms that I would access when I was on the basketball court and in practices, and we'd have to do wall sits and hold a basketball between your legs, and like your body's shaking because it hurts so much. And I would go into this place in my mind that would help me like stay in that space, and I would try those mechanisms again Indian yoga, and it was not working. And I was humbled by that experience. There's something about slowing down that it is a challenge for a person who's used to going fast. And I
Mm.
feel like our society is used to producing and going fast and doing, and there's value in doing and all those things. So just wondering, what comes up for you, like, around
Oh,
all of that.
oh yeah. I mean, when I experienced my first yin yoga practice, it dropped in so immediately. I was like, oh my God, this is a total rewiring of my conditioned way of being with my body. Growing up a dancer, I was injuring myself constantly and was the kind of person that I was just so passionate about the art form and so like I wanted to be great,
Mm,
at in my art, and I think whenever we have that ambition, it can push us beyond our actual physical limitations. And I was healing from so many injuries at that point, and I remember how profound it was for me to realize that I needed to totally rewire my system. I had to totally shed this conditioning that like no pain, no gain sort of
yeah,
mentality, you know, feeling like if I wasn't experiencing something like deeply painful, I wasn't progressing.
yeah,
And I feel like it's such a reflection of the societal sort of progress at the expense of everything,
mm,
basically. Like no recognition or understanding of how our actions impact the
yeah,
environment, the whole.
yeah,
And, going back to what you were talking about, what your friend Claudia was bringing up around the body's relationship to the earth, I love this idea of our individual systems, our individual electric nervous systems. As those heal, there's like a reconnection, almost like a grounding that
yeah,
is able to channel the energy.
yeah,
But what came to mind also that I feel like inspired to talk about now is how those of us that are either immigrants to this country or have been displaced from our native lands, all of the white settlers that came here, like thinking of the displacement of our homeland, and
yeah,
all the people that have been displaced from their homelands, how that has almost like jolted the body from its ground, you
yeah,
know? And so the healing process, it feels quite nuanced and complex with the land. There's like this personal relationship to our ancestry, but also then like this healing relationship with the ancestors of the land, like trying to understand how to be here in a good way when we're not on our own native land.
yeah,
That's been a huge question for me, ongoing as a
yeah,
white embodied person. It's a constant question. Um, that being said, the earth is the mother to us all, and so there is
right,
like a deeper root that I think we could tap.
yeah,
But we also have to acknowledge, the the deep trauma of our every human being's relationship to the earth.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean, the yin practice. Going back to the yin practice. So I want to hear more about this moment where you realized that your approach was not going to be effective for this particular
yeah.
practice. And I wonder if you were able to feel a shift and what that shift was.
I did. I'm glad you asked that question. And so my approach. So I want to give you a flash of Natalie. I would say like seventh, eighth grade. Yeah, because that was the gym that I was in. Because it's like a very vivid memory. Yeah, seventh, eighth grade. Um, Back up to the wall sits,
Mhm.
legs are jiggling, really intense. I didn't have quite the words for meditation at the time. Even though now that I think back, like I did know about meditation. I would just always fall asleep during it. It's a story for another time. And I would go into this flow state, but it was the way that I would enter it was a very, what's the right word for that? It was very intense. I'm a Scorpio. I'm intense. So it was just a very intense, like, I remember my face would like be very hard. My body would be very like tense. My vision would be very like almost like an eagle eye vision. I would focus on something on the other side of the room and just like zoom into that.
Mhm.
And then would notice on some level that things were happening in my body, would be so focused on the thing that I zoomed in that like I would almost like not quite dissociate, but like almost dissociate. It was like that.
Totally.
It was like there was, I was still here, but I wasn't here.
Mhm.
It wasn't
Yeah,
a full body
I can
dissociation.
totally
It was,
feel what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. And so I tried doing that in this very gentle practice. And I feel like that's the difference, is that it's a gentle practice. And so when I would try to muster up that like intensity, it would make it worse. It was making the like excess energy that was flowing through my body. Actually, I'm like in the room where I was doing yin yoga um, with you, and I remember like laying on my side and my body was twisted in a particular way, and I just like it was very uncomfortable, and I was trying to go to that place again, trying to muster up that intensity again, and it was making it more uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
I finally just had to like laugh at myself. Like that was the tipping point of when I could change. It was like actually just had to like found myself looking at myself and just laughed. Well, this is so ridiculous. And
Mm.
like had to like kind of like soften
Mhm.
instead of being so tense. I had to soften into it
Mhm.
and be like, hey, this is where you're at. Like it's okay. You're having a hard time holding this space. It's all right. Like, it's okay. You don't have to go so hard and so like, and
Yeah.
I was noticing, I remember noticing like all these judgments coming up of like, oh, you're not in shape and your body and all these things. And it's like, hey, it's okay. You are where you are. And so it was a different kind of, not that I ever fully got to like settle into it
Mhm.
and like whole like I would go in and I would go to the edge and then it'd be like, all right, I need to like shift a little bit. Okay, again. But there was something about that like forgiveness for not having it at 100, you know?
Mhm.
That was it was a really like, oh yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's beautiful that you were able to experience that shift for yourself through uh, humorous self reflection. I think it's such a gift of yours, actually, to be able to um, like lovingly laugh at yourself. It's a gift that I wish more people
It's taken
had.
me quite a long time to get there, trust me.
But like what you're pointing to is so important, I think, because it's in terms of like how we approach our own healing.
Yeah.
Um, I have found personally that this particular way of being with what is allows for the organic process of healing to occur without the human like desire for it. So it's like
Mm,
a surrendering into the innate intelligence of our incredible, magical, divine body,
yeah.
um, and feeling that all that we need to do is bear witness
Yeah.
to the process. And there's something in that that is really humbling intentionally for the human ego. And the way I look at it is like if I really want to heal, I'm going to be approaching aspects of myself that feel really disconnected,
Yeah.
right? That don't feel seen, that don't feel understood, that feel wounded. How would I
Yeah.
want to approach if that being was outside of me and I was having an
Yeah.
experience with someone in that state? How
Yeah.
would I approach them? How would I genuinely want to approach them? And in gentleness, it's not that it's, I mean, we know this, but the vulnerability of gentleness is not like some sort of passive,
Right.
um, like wishy-washy
I'll
experience.
answer that. Yeah.
Deeply present,
Yeah.
deeply present and receptive
Yeah.
to this whatever is being experienced. And so we basically just turn that towards our own body.
Yeah.
And the magic is that it really, it's so beautiful to watch that as soon as we create a container where we can really witness what is happening in the body, the unwinding that starts to happen is just so beautiful
Mm-hmm.
to watch the organic healing process, to witness
Yeah.
it through the sensations and emotions and memory, or like whatever you're experiencing as your body is unwinding, which
Yeah.
which is the part where the skill that you have for staying present, deeply present, focused and present, will come in handy.
Right.
Because if we just flow, if we just like surrender to the emotion of what's occurring without holding presence in the body, then we can sometimes spiral out into a
Yeah.
deeper story. And so
Yeah.
it is a balance of holding really, really, really profound presence while also allowing the purge, so to speak, to occur in the
Yeah.
healing process. Um, and interestingly, the yin practice, the asanas, and the way that we relax into these shapes, it's it we're so used to using our muscles to
Yeah.
make movements.
Yeah.
And this particular practice is actually, it is a surrendering to the gravitational pull of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So we're allowing the earth's love for us, her gravity, to unwind us, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically just opening the space for us to feel more and more at home here, and
Yeah.
less wound up
Mm.
in the patterning of our connective tissue, which is really like the map of our story, of our human
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So there's like deeper and deeper layers of how I feel like this practice is so profoundly needed for the moment that we're in.
There's a few questions I have that came up, and I'm
Mhm.
like, they were like very fast questions that came through. So, for one thing, I'll start with this actually. What led you to this yet like yin practices? Like, how did you go from dancing? I actually don't even know if dancing isn't separate from that, but I just find myself being curious of.
Well, so I traveled to India and I learned yoga nidra from my teachers there. And yoga nidra was the first sort of opening, I think, to the deep understanding that I needed to make contact with my own mind,
Mm,
I think, in
mm,
an embodied way. So yoga nidra is like the body's totally still, but consciousness is moving through all the areas
mhm,
of the body, and then allowing the awareness of all the layers of the bodies to become more and more illuminated.
mm,
So picking up that practice, I feel like, was the seed that was planted for me to go deeper. And really, the vinyasa yoga practice, I had an excellent teacher in San Francisco, Keith Borden, who was just an incredible, incredible teacher, to the point where he would cue. in a way that really brought me into the body in a way that dance did,
Mm,
into movement, is really deep sensitivity. So I think I was just always really interested in that realm, like the
yeah,
deeply sensitive sensing realm. Like I really loved feeling subtle movement in the body.
yeah,
So when I found Yoga Nidra, that was like a really beautiful opening and expansion of that inner awareness.
yeah.
And really, I didn't know that I was gonna walk this path, this like yin path. My yin teacher Danielle Hugenboom, this rad chick, she brought it in, and she just brought it in a way that it just felt revolutionary. Like it
Mm,
felt like the practice itself was like had potential to create really big change for me personally, but like for everyone who had contact with it.
yeah,
And because I was interested in healing, because I was trying to heal myself, all the injuries and trauma and really self-destructive behavior,
mm,
um, I just clinged onto it. It really just fed me. So as a student of it for a few years before I started teaching it really, I just felt so much personal healing through the practice. I was just passionate about expressing and sharing it because I felt it as a vehicle to really help people, which is really what feels at this point in my life one of the most important things to me.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and then the more I taught vinyasa yoga and like these like very dancey external expression yoga practices, it was like the more I did that, the less I felt satisfied.
yeah,
Um, because I saw students, although they were having a really powerful experience that I definitely honored in the classroom with vinyasa yoga, there's like
yeah,
this deep expression that needs to happen, which I totally honor and respect. There wasn't deep change happening. It was all sort of like surface level shifting. And I, like you, I'm Scorpio rising and like really wanting the depth experience and wanting to support people into those spaces.
yeah,
So it just became more and more interesting to me to bring people into the yin space. As much resistance as I felt
yeah,
from people, it felt
yeah,
like like this is actually your medicine, and I know it's hard, and I know it
yeah.
feels like you're not doing anything, but once you get through the numbness, there's
Uh,
so much going on.
no, this is so real.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so I'm trying to remember those other two questions that came up as you were speaking. Oh, you were talking about the earth
Mm.
and this land, and something that I feel like there's a way I can weave these two questions together. Um, one thing I know we've talked about a lot is bringing our attention to healing the land, particularly like the trauma that is like the earth has been present for um, all of it.
Mhm.
And we have forgotten, not all of us, a lot of people still remember, the majority of the humans on this earth have forgotten that. And
Mhm.
I come from I know you do as well, like from the perspective, or I hold the perspective that we are all connected.
Mhm.
And so it can be very easy to be like, oh, that's outside of me, like that's that person's stuff and blah blah blah. But the reality is that there um, there's more that connects us than separates us,
Mhm.
right? And and I know that there's the like I remember having this experience once that really like anchored in um, this knowing that when I heal my physical body, like the earth receives the healing too.
Mhm.
And it was my friend Madhu, who's a really talented musician and singer and artist. is also a sound healer, and he was doing a sound healing um, session for me. I remember I was like really sick and congested, and he was using tuning forks on my body.
Mm.
And I remember the tuning forks would go on different parts of my body, and I would literally see portals opening up in the earth.
Mm.
It was like via my body, and it wasn't like portals, like ooh, something's coming in, but it was almost like, you know, when you see geysers when they explode and
Mm.
that pressure gets released, like that's what I was seeing as I'm in this really deep meditative state while
Mm.
receiving sound healing.
Mm.
And I remember being like, wow, it really is so important for us to take responsibility for our healing, um, because there's, besides like us benefiting and like the people who get to experience us and have contact and our ancestors and our descendants and all that, but also like the earth receives that healing too if you're aware of that,
Mm.
you know. And so I'm curious about, you know, what are some practices or even some um, you know, things that come up for you in this particular like time that we're in, because it feels like it's, you know, I kind of get tired of saying like the times that we're living in because it feels very like cliche and
Mhm.
like ridiculous. But at the same time, like we do like, I mean, cosmologically there's a lot of stuff happening. If you're paying attention to anything that's happening, it's just like a lot. It's like a constant bombardment of things.
Mhm.
um there's like, it feels, you know, depending on how you, what you bring your attention to, there's a lot of different realities that are existing. And one thing that like I feel myself pushing against is that we're all separate, that everything's separate. I'm come for the inquiry of like, actually, how are we all on the same, how are we all connected, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, well,
And so,
something came up while you were talking about the like geyser release, and I was imagining, like the release of stagnant energy or the release of a block, what has
mhm,
been blocking the flow,
mhm,
because really life force, chi, prana, whatever you
mhm,
want to call it, is moving in flow. That's what allows us to experience existence, is movement
yeah,
itself. And so when stagnancy occurs in the body or on the earth, or toxicity is placed into the system that deregulates the normal flow of things, then we
mhm,
experience sickness.
mhm,
It's like a negative health.
yeah.
My yoga teachers talk about health as like negative and positive health, not
That
not
makes
just
sense because we have chi, which is life,
yeah.
and anything that distorts it would be against life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, the in the yin practice, I haven't actually looked into the recent science on fascia. I need to do a little bit of research to get like up on it a little bit more. But the most recent science I've looked into around fascia, there's this theory
Mm,
that the fascia within the fascia is actually the meridian channels,
mhm.
perhaps like that the
Can
energy
you
body.
explain the fascia for those who may not know what it is?
So fascia is like, it's essentially this uh, really, it's deeply collagenous. I
Mhm,
think that's the word. Material in the body that is web-like. It moves through all tissues. It essentially connects everything to everything else. So some people think about the body as like your skeleton is holding you up.
right.
But the truth is that if you were to take the fascia out, the bones would just fall,
Yeah.
and the fascia would stay in generally the form of your body.
Yeah.
So your fascia is like the actual structure, and it has plasticity. So like our muscle tissue has elasticity, it can
Mhm,
stretch and release.
mhm,
The fascia holds form, so there's more collagen, and it
mhm,
stretches slowly to shapeshift, so you can experience long lasting change if you work with your connective tissue in a slow, gentle yin way. They're yin tissues, so they need a yin approach. So it's so interesting to think about how working with those tissues allows the breath of the energy body to return to homeostasis or to balance or harmony, and that the structure can actually support the wellness of the being.
Yeah.
And so if we bring that back to the earth, like we have to clean the pathways, we have to clean the structures, we have to, and of course, like it feels overwhelming because it's just so big. But I mean, anything we can do to make choices to clean up the waterways in particular.
Yeah.
But the food that we eat, the way we treat our soil, the practical ways that we are with, especially with the food that we grow,
Yeah.
and how we feed ourselves, because that's a reciprocal, very
Yeah.
easily understood reciprocal relationship. You know.
Yeah.
So in terms of practices, I mean, that feels understanding when you were talking about like relationship with the earth and how so many have forgotten, it like lights the fire of my passion to bring people back into their embodied experience, because there's no, from where I'm standing, I don't see a way to convince people through the mind that the earth is important. I just don't think it's possible
Yeah.
for us to fully integrate the knowing that you're talking about, of
Yeah.
you had an embodied experience of
Yeah.
how your body is completely synchronistic and in harmony and in connection with the earth, and that
Yeah.
your healing is the earth's healing.
Yeah.
But everyone needs to be given somehow, everyone needs to have that direct experience for themselves. And until they do have an embodied, deeply earthly experience, it's going to be
Yeah.
difficult to convince them to
Yeah.
act differently. So that's why people, it takes like a healing crisis for people to
Yeah.
actually feel like, oh God, my body is okay, my body is important, I
Yeah.
can't exist without the health of this body. And then they come into their body and they start to understand, maybe they have the direct
Yeah.
experience of like, whoa, like it matters what I eat. Oh, it matters what I eat because the soil has this relationship to these plants, and it like expands the whole
Yeah.
healing processes through the body, that there's just no other way.
Yeah.
So anything that people can do to bring themselves into their body in a conscious, mindful, and it has to slow down, because the pace that we're at, there's actually something that happens with our nervous systems when we move at a fast pace. We numb out so that we can, it's a survival sort of
Yeah.
mechanism, right? We're able
Yeah.
to numb out so that we can go quicker when the cheetah's chasing
Mhm.
us, whatever, the tiger's on us, if that, that response.
Yeah.
And then when the system can release and purge, then we actually can feel feedback on the ground again.
Mhm.
So the slowing down is essential, so that we can start to feel what's actually happening. And that is the scary part for
Yeah.
many, because there's just like a backlog of just experiences that they haven't fully processed.
Yeah.
And that's where the healing containers come in, because
Yeah.
for many it's so intimidating to do this work alone. And so that's where I feel like community comes in to support, and the containers that allow for that kind of healing to occur.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, maybe that answers your
Interesting.
question.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking of like what these lockdowns have done is force people to slow down,
Mhm.
but like not giving them the tools to do it. And it's like, how do you, you know, I earlier was speaking about an experience of in the yin yoga class, like being aware that I was going into this experience and noticing the uncomfortableness.
Mhm.
Like thinking about people who didn't have the awareness of like what, you know, and all the challenges that folks have been experiencing in different parts of the world and the different experiences that everyone's having in that. And I believe very strongly that we are beings that are meant to be in community and have connection with one another. So then when you take away that, or or take away this the ease of being able to access that,
Yeah.
um, all that comes up for a person with
Oh,
that, and people are still trying to like navigate how to work and produce and you know um, there's a part of me that always feels like my heart kind of drops a little bit when people are like, oh, when things get back to normal, and like there's a part of me that like wants to like, I don't know if that's gonna happen.
mhm.
Like I don't know at this point if we can go back to how things were, like if that's even something that is possible,
Right.
you know
Right.
and it's like,
Or that we would actually desire, you
yeah,
know. It feels
that yeah,
like this experience is as painful as it is, for sure. I mean, I have all the tools and I still experienced so much pain,
same,
you know. So someone without these resources, like just praying for their souls to pass through, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but I mean, I'm reminded right now of this this moment, this healing crisis moment, like what that feels like when we go through it, and perhaps we could shift the perspective on the collective experience at the moment as a collective healing crisis,
mhm,
and as opposed to saying like, oh, I just want to feel how I felt before, like numbed out and not aware of all the things
yeah,
that were going on. Like, yeah,
yeah,
ignorance is kind of better. It feels like that when you're in the healing crisis moment, when everything
yeah,
feels like it's like gone to shit and it's just
yeah,
chaos.
yeah,
And the Taoists talk about yin as being both the earthly, like the form itself, but also like the great mystery, like the
yeah,
chaos of the unknown.
yeah,
And so to come home requires being able to pass through that sort of like passageway that
yeah,
feels like a birth canal, like of like total chaos and pressure and intensity and like pain and discomfort. And then there is an emergence that
mhm,
always occurs because the yin and yang dance infinitely forever.
yeah,
But to help people through to accept,
yeah,
to accept, which is the first principle of yin, essentially, is like find your shape, like where you are in this, and find your edge within it. It's basically a teaching about acceptance, like
yeah,
acceptance of where you are.
yeah,
And then from there, resolve to remain
yeah,
for time.
yeah.
That's essentially the practice.
That,
And they
that
don't say anything about the emergence, because it's not about, when you're on the other side, the practice has been set down.
right.
It's like the yogis, the sages talk about how our practices are like boons. They take us
Yeah,
across the sea of our transformation, and then we get to set them down
yeah,
once we've emerged on the other side. So it's like understanding the larger view of what we're in, I feel like would be such so helpful for us to continue to remember that um, we're in a process.
yeah,
We're in a, if we choose it, we're in a transformational process. We can
yeah,
use this as as Ram Dass says, grist for the mill, just like putting it
Say that
in.
one more time.
Ram Dass, he talks about like the difficulties as
Yeah.
grist for the mill, like just like stuff that you put into the engine to like move
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's very accurate because it's, that saying of like, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I actually have clients who are like, they have a goal and it's like, it's all about the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's not though. Like the goal is just allowing you to orient yourself to like have the journey that you'll have.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being thinking for myself, like how many times have I had goals for myself and reached those goals, and it wasn't about the goals at all.
Right.
It
Because the
wasn't any
goals are always
satisfaction of like, oh, I got the goal. It was
exactly.
more like all the growth that occurred
Mm-hmm.
because I oriented myself in the direction of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm only just remembering this in this moment right now. Like having this conversation, I'm like, right, yeah, like that too. And with like we've been going through layers of chaos, and something I can't remember exactly what you said, but it reminded me of this really profound experience I had in the ceremony a few years ago of like I was just going through like internal chaos, like everything was obliterated, and I was like, oh, like this is difficult, and I was having a really challenging time. I kept fighting against the chaos, and it wasn't until the moment I had awareness of the access to my breath
Mm-hmm.
that I was able to, it's not that the chaos stopped, because the chaos, if anything, got even more complicated, but I was able to like rest in it. No, rest is not the right word. I was able to pause in it. And I remember very clearly, vividly hearing the warrior stays calm in the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget that all the time, obviously, because I'm human. Like
Mm-hmm.
every once in a while I remember I'm like, oh, I'm getting like tossed around in the tornado. Like I just have to breathe.
Yeah.
Catch my breath. Where is my breath? Come back to my body. Like
Mm-hmm.
and have that pause.
Mm-hmm.
As everything's like going to hell. It's not like I can control like the outside circumstances. It's just the only thing is this.
Yes.
And going back, and I feel like that's so core to like yin practices is learning that.
Yeah. Yes. The meditative state of being
Yeah.
is like, you could say, a goal of the practice. It's really just like the state from which you can practice.
Yeah. Should you choose to.
That's really where the practice can begin, is
Yeah.
when we then orient.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, orientation. God, it really feels like everything for me right now. Like
Right.
really deeply understanding, understanding where I am oriented.
Mm.
From there, I access my power and my capacity to choose
Mm-hmm.
how I am responding
Mm-hmm.
to what is occurring
Mm-hmm.
seemingly outside of me. Um, yeah, just it brings me back to thinking about the events that are occurring, that are in the world, that are really just like, it's like these like explosions keep happening, and how we are with those explosions um, is really coming to the surface. I'm watching a lot of people just add fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting in the last few days, just really sitting with like, like as I'm watching it, I'm like, is this helping or hurting?
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like to be supportive in this moment? How could I actually support the healing here? And I don't have an answer. I'm just, I'm really just in a space of curiosity about, um, yeah, I think a lot about when in my qigong kung fu practices, my teacher talks a lot about being mindful not to leak qi.
Mm.
And so what that feels like is that all of the movement that's occurring of qi is happening from a deeply I'm oriented in my low gravitational center, moving from that space
Mhm.
and doing the best I can to just continue to move from that space. And every time qi kind of like, if I lose awareness or lose awareness of where the chi is moving or where I'm intending to move the chi,
Mhm.
it'll leak. It'll like just like start flying around.
Mhm.
And I wonder, about how we can support and hold space for these explosions without leaking all of our
Mhm.
precious life force.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It's funny because without doing it, you're answering the third question that I had.
Oh yeah.
Like without knowing that was the question. Because both earlier you were talking about um, the aspect, of having that part of yourself. If it was a being outside of you, how would you talk to that aspect of yourself? And it makes me think of like, when I'm always curious about this of like, how do you communicate with people who have completely differing views that are
Yeah.
like oppositional, and their energy could be quite aggressive. It could
Yeah.
be very traumatizing for you. Like it could trigger your own traumas. And um, I'm constantly in this inquiry because I'm tired of us as like a human family continuing to like go around in this merry-go-round of like the same dance. It just looks slightly different, but it's the same thing over and over. Like it feels nonsensical to me.
Yeah.
And so I find myself being very curious of like, so how do we um, find the ways to connect heart to heart with someone who like doesn't doesn't even is like in a completely different reality of right.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I was having this talk with a friend of mine a few days ago of an experience that we were both in, where I was in opposition with someone, and he was in the space like witnessing and holding space for like the prayer was for healing to happen, but it took us quite a while to get there. and and he was talking about that he feels that it's trust, and what I was saying, like trust being the thing that connects us.
Mm.
And I reflected, I was like, I didn't have trust in this person. Like I very clearly said, I do not trust you.
Yeah.
And for me, what was the the like almost like key that helped us change what was happening was for me to recognize that I am feeling all that I was feeling because I love this person so much. I
Mm.
didn't agree with what they were doing. It was impacting me in a really like horrible way.
Mm.
There were so many things. We were complete opposite like sides of the polarity, and also like I realized it was love. And
Mm.
once I dropped from this like very like I was angry, I was like I was raging angry. And so once I was able to like kind of drop into the heart and that place, then everything else changed.
Mm.
And I think I lost you for a bit.
I can still hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Alex?
Yeah, I can. Your image is frozen though, but I can hear you. Okay, just waiting for Natalie to get back.
Yay, we're back.
Hi.
Sorry about that.
All good. You were just talking about something so potent. So potent.
I still got the train of thought. I'm actually really surprised the internet has managed to hold us this long, because I'm aware of many users being on the internet at this time.
Yes.
It's very funny. The timing is quite curious. But yeah, so going back to what I was sharing is that the thing that I realized, I had to release my ideologies and my like everything that I was fighting for. I actually had to, like, in the moment, it wasn't that I was ignoring them or abandoning them. I just had to release them,
Yeah.
you know, and
So that you could
get
listen.
to, like, say that again.
So that you could listen.
Yeah, and like get into that deeper, like what's actually, it's this thing that when I was in my master's program, I remember in couples therapy, like our teacher, he loved saying this, which would always make me laugh, but it was just always so true and so profound. He would always say, it's not about the dirty dishes, saying like couples who are like fighting about the dishes, it's like, it's not about the dishes. And it, like in that moment I had this experience of like, oh, it's not about the thing that we're fighting. It is, and it's not. It's actually what's deeper. And once we were able to get into that, once I was able to like release this thing and like drop down into like actually what was happening, then it allowed for him to like release his and drop in and meet me there, and then we could like listen to each other, and that was like that connecting point. And so obviously this is a person who I like a friendship with, and like there was care already, so I'm always curious of like, how do we translate that type of experience to something that, to like a stranger who you don't know, who you don't have that, like, you know. I don't expect either one of us to have the answer for that question, but it is a very curious, it would be awesome to find the solution to that answer.
Yeah.
And I feel, I mean, on one point I will say that, like, you know, like I've this past year, and you know this, I've like dedicated my like time and attention to like healing of conflict, very much like coming from like, we can only heal our stuff, right? And I do know that is a part of it. But you know, how, if you're a person who's been dedicated to your path of healing your own wounds around conflict, but you're in contact with someone who doesn't and may not be interested in it, in any kind of healing, how do you, you know?
Yeah. Two things come up with that. One is that it's so deeply personal to whoever you're in communication with. Like there's this need for responsiveness, you know, like capacity to be in the state of receptivity and responsiveness, responsibility. And the second thing that I came up while you were talking was my friend Kristen and I were having this conversation just yesterday about, you know, watching these like massive conflicting battles happening, and just like wondering like where we can channel this like battle energy, like how we can transmute it within ourselves. And we were also talking about like what is the, like what is happening here, and underneath, for me, what I see and I intuitively feel is that underneath all of the like rage and battling is a deep need for connection.
Yes.
And like desiring to feel seen and heard and understood.
Yeah.
And so and so we got on this whole train of thought that was like, what, like, does everyone want unity?
Yeah.
Like, is that something that everyone is actually like craving? Like maybe that's what actually everyone is actually deep desiring. However, the way that it's coming through and we're getting caught in the need to like have our specific need met
Yeah.
that we're like fighting for.
Yeah.
But like, what if the actual battle underneath all that is just wanting to feel that sense of communion,
Yeah.
the reunion with other and with self and with the earth? I don't know. I don't know if it feels like it's like almost patterned in our DNA, that like
Yeah.
we're like meant to seek reunion.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't know though.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. Um, Definitely a lot of confusion about how that need is being met,
Right.
like if that's the truth,
If
like
that
it's
is,
interesting
if
that
that is
like
in
we're like
fact.
killing people, like it's a little bit confusing, but
Hmm.
I I wonder.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's really what's underneath.
Yeah.
Which comes back to what you were talking about how love is really the foundation through which you were able to communicate.
Right. And I don't mean it in like a very like I know oftentimes people can like roll their eyes and be like, oh yeah. And I after it, what was it? I was doing a Ulu class with brother Keone from Pohala,
Yeah.
for medicine, and I I had I covered my eyes, so I had like a bandana cover my eyes, and my family, my uncle and aunt were over, and I walked down the stairs afterwards and had the cover like that, like on my around my head, my hair was down. My cousin, I mean, my uncle was teasing me about like being a hippie basically, and he's like, "Oh, I just want peace and love, man." It was like really funny to hear that, and so
Yeah.
like I'm aware that like when you talk about love in that way, people can be like, I just want peace and love, man. But like actually really like that's not so and oftentimes it's like condescend, there's a
Sure.
uh condescending like condensation. No, not condensation. Whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. It can be like teased in a very condescending manner.
Yeah.
Um, but when in fact, like, but then why are we here? What is the
Right.
point of
It's
life?
like it's like the grounded love and light perspective.
Right.
It's like the where new age spirituality just like wants to basically just like none of this is really like none of this is really happening really like we don't even need we're not even going to look at it
Right.
because then like that's going to become a reality like bitch it is your reality like this is what's happening like I don't know where you're living but this is
You
planet earth.
can't pretend it away.
Yeah, but like the grounded it feels grounded to me when we talk about
Right.
love as being the foundation for our capacity to communicate because that feels true.
Yeah.
That feels true and it's not like the romantic it's the deep connectivity love it's the gravity that the of the earth it's
Makes
the
me think of the fascia.
exactly it's the magnet the field through which we can relate
Yeah.
basic
Yeah.
it's what we call love because we
Yeah.
don't have another word for it
Yeah.
because try to describe love to I mean seriously it's like trying
Just
to
speaking English
describe the
language,
Tao.
yeah.
It's like trying to describe the Tao. It's like you can't like the Tao that can
Yeah.
be talked about is not the Tao, right? It's like
Yeah.
the fabric of our lived experience.
Yeah. 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 Man, Alex, I feel like you and I can like go on and on, talk about
I
so
know.
much about this. But I am mindful of time, and I know for me personally it's hard to listen to videos for a very long time. So
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
aware of like how long we've been on the call. So I would like to ask you before we get off this call, what are you creating in your life right now?
Mm,
Did you get that? I wasn't
beauty.
sure if I froze.
I'm creating beauty through um offerings that are devoted to our individual and collective reconnection with our body and the body of the earth, the purpose of healing, the purpose of healing, and restoration of the natural harmonics that are inherent to this beautiful planet. So that's what I'm offering. And specifically, what I'm offering currently is what I'm calling Yin for the Evolution, which is a 4-week series that we're just through our first week of practice, where we're meeting to practice Yin Yoga and Yoga Nidra and talk about the Yin way and how we can integrate these practices into our daily lives, taking it not just in our practice space, but into how we are with our experiences.
Awesome. And for folks who may be interested in working with you, how can they find you and find your work?
So the easiest way is to go to my website, which is functioning like a virtual altar right now. So all my offerings are there. So that's groundedcrown.com. Yeah.
Very nice. And is there anything else you would like to share as we close this sacred time together?
Just giving thanks to you, Natalie, for the opportunity to connect and to feel. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to be in conversation. It always is very illuminating and helps me to understand myself more and more and get to know you, which is always so fun. So, just very grateful. Thank you for opening these conversations. It feels really important and really sweet medicine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for being who you are and all of who you are. I really cherish our friendship, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect today and to share all of what was coming through. And I look forward to the day that we can sit and share tea ways again.
Yes.
And yeah, I love you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you to everyone for watching. And if you got this far, just thank you for listening and being engaged in our conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And look forward to the next time we get to connect. All right.
Love you.
See you all.
Bye.
Bye.